The Tenerife Airport Disaster, March 27, 1977, Tenerife, Canary Islands. What began as a quiet Sunday at a small island airport became the worst aviation tragedy in history. Two Boeing 747s, one from KLM and one from Pan Am, collided on the runway, killing 583 people. That afternoon, a terrorist bombing at another airport forced dozens of large planes to land at Tenerife's small Los Rodeos airport. The airfield was overcrowded. Taxiways were jammed with jumbo jets, and a thick fog rolled in, cutting visibility to less than 500 feet. Confusion spread through the control tower radios. At 5:06 p.m., KLM Flight 4805, commanded by Captain Jacob Van Zanten, lined up for takeoff. Pan Am Flight 1736, led by Captain Victor Grubbs, was still taxiing down the same runway, trying to find the right exit. A radio overlap caused both pilots to misunderstand the tower. Van Zanten thought he had clearance to take off. Grubbs believed he still had time to turn. The KLM jet accelerated into the fog. Seconds later, the Pan Am crew saw its lights racing toward them. "There he is!" shouted Grubbs. He pushed the throttles forward, but there was no time. The KLM's nose lifted too late, and its engines tore through the Pan Am's fuselage. Fire erupted instantly. The KLM jet exploded, killing all 248 people on board. The Pan Am plane split open and burned. Out of 396 passengers, only 61 survived by escaping through holes in the fuselage. "We crawled through fire and smoke," survivor Dorothy Kelly recalled. "People were crying, praying. It was chaos." The official investigation found that heavy fog, poor communication, and human error caused the crash. Captain Van Zanten, one of KLM's most respected pilots, had made a fatal mistake. The report changed aviation forever. New cockpit communication rules and stricter air traffic phrasing were introduced worldwide. Today, a small memorial stands on the island, marked by the words, "Their loss taught us to never forget the cost of haste and misunderstanding." The LAX Ramp Explosion, June 6, 1974, Los Angeles International Airport. The afternoon sun was bright over the tarmac when a quiet routine turned into a deadly explosion. Within seconds, fire and debris tore through the cargo area of LAX, killing several workers and injuring dozens more. That morning, mechanics were unloading a DC-10 jet owned by Aeromexico. Nearby, another cargo crew was handling containers of highly flammable chemicals. At that time, airports often stored such materials close to passenger areas, a rule that would soon change forever. Around 3:30 p.m., witnesses saw smoke rising from a maintenance truck parked near Hangar 15. Moments later, an enormous blast shook the ground. "The whole ramp lifted," said a ground worker who survived. "I was thrown backward 20 feet. Everything was burning." The explosion ripped open two fuel trucks, sending flaming jet fuel across the concrete. The fire spread rapidly, trapping several workers near a chain-link fence. Airport firefighters arrived within minutes, but the heat was so intense that aluminum parts melted on the ground. The flames reached nearly 30 feet high, and black smoke could be seen from downtown Los Angeles. Inside Terminal 2, passengers panicked as windows shattered. Flights were halted, and dozens of emergency vehicles filled the runway. It took crews over an hour to bring the fire under control. When it was over, 3 airport employees were dead, and more than 30 were injured. The official investigation later found that a leaking fuel line in a maintenance truck had ignited fumes from chemical containers stored too close by. "The combination was like a bomb," the fire chief said at the press briefing. "It should never have been there." The disaster led to major reforms in U.S. airport safety rules. Flammable materials were moved to remote storage zones, and ground crews received new training on fuel handling. The city of Los Angeles introduced stricter fire codes for all airport operations. Today, few travelers passing through LAX know that one of America's worst airport ramp fires happened there. But among older workers, June 6, 1974, remains a day remembered in silence when routine work turned deadly in seconds. The Chicago O'Hare Crash, May 25, 1979, Chicago, Illinois. It was a warm Friday afternoon at O'Hare International Airport. Hundreds of travelers were heading home for Memorial Day weekend when American Airlines Flight 191 lifted off from runway 32R. 31 seconds later, it was gone. A fireball just beyond the runway, killing all 271 on board and 2 people on the ground. Flight 191 was a DC-10 jet bound for Los Angeles. At 3:02 p.m., the aircraft began its takeoff roll. Passengers felt a smooth climb until a sudden jolt shook the plane. The left engine broke away from the wing, tearing hydraulic lines and severing cables. Fuel spilled out, igniting in a bright orange flash. The jet rolled sharply, banking past 90 degrees. Air traffic controllers watched in shock. 191, you've lost an engine, one called out. There was no reply. The plane's left wing dropped, and the nose pitched upward. Without hydraulics, the pilots had no control. At 3:04 p.m., the DC-10 hit an open field just north of the airport perimeter fence, sliding across a trailer park and exploding. Witnesses saw a massive cloud of black smoke rise hundreds of feet. "It was like the ground shook," said a firefighter. "Then all you saw was flame." Emergency crews arrived within minutes, but there were no survivors. The crash site burned for hours. Investigators recovered the black boxes late that night. The National Transportation Safety Board discovered that maintenance crews had used an improper method to remove the engines for inspection, lifting them with a forklift instead of specialized equipment. The shortcut had weakened a critical pylon bolt. During takeoff, the bolt snapped, causing the engine to detach and rip key systems apart. The failure started on the ground, not in the air, the report concluded. After the tragedy, all DC-10 jets were grounded until safety checks were completed. Airlines across the U.S. changed maintenance procedures overnight. The disaster also led to new FAA rules about redundancy and inspection. A memorial stands today near the crash site in Des Plaines, engraved with 273 names, a reminder that even one shortcut in aviation can cost hundreds of lives. The fog collision at Detroit Metro Airport. December 3, 1990, Detroit, Michigan. A heavy winter fog settled over Detroit Metropolitan Airport. Visibility was so poor that pilots could barely see the runway lights. Inside the tower, controllers struggled to keep track of planes taxiing for departure. At 1:45 a.m., confusion turned deadly. 2 planes collided on the ground, and 8 people lost their lives. Northwest Airlines Flight 1482, a DC-9 jet, was scheduled to fly to Pittsburgh. Just a few hundred meters away, Northwest Flight 299, a Boeing 727 bound for Memphis, waited for takeoff. The fog reduced visibility to less than 1,000 feet, and radio chatter filled the air. Controllers instructed Flight 1482 to taxi to runway 3C, but in the blinding fog, the DC-9 took a wrong turn. "We can't see the markings," one pilot said over the radio. The controller repeated directions, but it was already too late. The DC-9 had accidentally crossed onto the active runway, directly in the path of the 727 accelerating for takeoff. At 1:45 a.m., the 727's right wing sliced into the smaller DC-9's fuselage. A massive fireball erupted, lighting up the fog. "It was like the whole sky exploded," said one witness from a nearby hangar. Inside the DC-9, panic broke out as flames spread through the cabin. The pilots tried to open the emergency exits, but thick smoke made it almost impossible to see. The 727 pilots aborted takeoff and stopped safely down the runway. But on the DC-9, 8 people, including both pilots and several passengers, died from smoke and burns. 22 others managed to escape through emergency slides, some running barefoot on frozen pavement. Fire crews arrived within minutes, but the fire burned hot and fast. One survivor recalled, "I could hear people calling for help, but the smoke was too thick." The investigation revealed that the DC-9 had mistakenly entered the wrong taxiway and that poor signage and outdated airport maps contributed to the confusion. The National Transportation Safety Board blamed inadequate markings, lack of ground radar, and miscommunication. After the crash, airports across America installed surface movement radar to help controllers see planes during fog or snow. New taxiway lights and clearer signs became mandatory. For Detroit, that cold December night remains a lesson carved into history. How one wrong turn in the fog can cost innocent lives. The Concorde runway fire, July 25, 2000, Paris, France. It was a bright summer afternoon at Charles de Gaulle Airport. Dozens of passengers boarded Air France Flight 4590, a Concorde jet bound for New York. For many, it was a dream, the world's fastest airliner, famous for luxury and speed. But just 2 minutes after takeoff, the dream ended in flames. At 4:42 p.m., the Concorde began its takeoff roll on runway 26R. Inside the cockpit, Captain Christian Marty advanced the throttles to full power. The aircraft roared down the runway, engines glowing, but near 180 miles per hour, something went wrong. A sharp noise echoed through the cabin. A burst tire. Unknown to the crew, a metal strip that had fallen from another plane lay on the runway. The tire hit it and exploded. A piece of rubber struck the underside of the wing, rupturing a fuel tank. Flames burst from the left side of the aircraft. "Fire! Fire on the left!" shouted the control tower. The crew tried to gain altitude, but the damaged engine lost power. Smoke filled the cabin as the jet struggled to climb. Passengers saw fire streaming past their windows. The entire left wing was burning, one witness later told investigators. The plane climbed briefly to 200 feet, then rolled left and crashed into a small hotel near the airport. The explosion sent fire across the ground. All 109 people on board and 4 people on the ground were killed. Investigators quickly found the cause. The titanium strip from a Continental Airlines DC-10 had caused the tire burst that ruptured the fuel tank. The official report blamed foreign object damage and inadequate design protection. The disaster grounded all Concorde jets for over a year. Engineers redesigned the fuel tanks and installed Kevlar liners to prevent ruptures. Air France Flight 4590 was the only fatal Concorde crash in history, yet it ended the era of supersonic passenger travel. When Concorde returned briefly to service in 2001, many said it never felt the same. A memorial now stands near Gonesse, France, where the jet fell. The plaque reads, "They flew faster than sound, and now their memory flies beyond time."